I love you, Mommy. Thank you for everything.
What I'd love to start with, Maggie, because I think, there's so much going on, and it's obvious that you've kind of pulled from so many different sources. If you could just talk a little bit about making the film, kind of how and when you started to make the film, and then kind of different techniques you used, and even the order you worked in a little bit.
So when I started working on Mommy, I felt like this was something that I needed to do and that I had nothing to lose. And this was a way of processing my mom's death, but also remembering everything. And through the process of this, I was always just taking photos and writing in my diary and collaging everything. And
I use the word collage, which I've watched this so many times, but somehow seeing it on this big screen, on such a big screen for the first time, hit me even more how much it is a collage kind of conceptually, but also visually. And that's something I know that really struck Chrissie also. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Chrissie, this idea of collage that you see in the film?
Yes, I want to also acknowledge Asha Penn is here with us, who who actually saw the potential for the film in what you were doing, Maggie, when you were sending Asha your thoughts and collage and various sort of materials as you found them. And it seems to me that the way collage works in this particular film, in your approach, which is also related to the way you make your sculpture too, is that the way you approach collage here is through emotion. So when you find a photograph, when you find an object, or when you think about something to do with a house, or your mum, or your toys, it creates an emotion. And that emotion is communicated through the object, the photograph, the image, and also the music. And so every shot and every feeling and every piece of music come together in this incredibly synthetic way, meaning its power lies in the way you synthesize that collage. This is not collage of one particular kind. It's not like you take a film and cut it up. It's not like you use super digital processes to do that. It's a collage of emotion, of memory, of music, sound, everything to do with your past, present, future. And it's more somehow to me than simply processing a mother's death. In a way, when I think of collage, I mean, what's the relationship between collage and editing? Because all film has, well, not all film, but the structure of conventional films, let's say, is the strength of them is in the editing. I mean, this is beautifully edited, Maggie. It's incredible, and that sense of editing, where editing ends and collage begins, and how the editing and collage are used to sort of trigger emotions, very strong emotions in us, and yet we're never allowed to linger. The pace is fast. And even when there's emotions like the dark music, you go into something very dark just after your mother's death. And then towards the end, when it's like, okay, the light, and you start with the aura, and then you go to the star, and the music accompanies that literal light that you start to use at the end. I mean, it's a collage that's so complex and so layered that it completely makes me rethink what I understand collage to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this screenshot even, I mean, there could have been myriad screenshots, but there's so many different kind of layered images in the film, and you keep doing it over and over again in such different ways. It's kind of amazing. One thing, though, that really has always struck me about the film, and that Chrissie just touched on, is the music, which I feel like you use to great effect. And can you talk a little bit about that? You know, when that got mixed into the film, and kind of what you were thinking about in making certain decisions about the music, about the soundtrack?
So I wanted to include everything I knew and love in the film, and when I had to leave New Jersey, or leave New York City and go move to New Jersey, I had to leave like the party scene, and like that was really close to like my heart at the time. And all my friends were like DJs, and I was like really into like music, and I would just listen to a lot of their music when I was like homesick in New Jersey, away from New York. So I felt like I was just listening to a lot of techno, and that kind of came into the movie in that way. And then like editing was kind of like using a simple form, just like cutting things really fast. And it kind of felt like DJing, like changing the scene with like the beat or things like that.
Yeah, you kind of can change the tenor of the film really quickly with however the music changes. One thing that we don't have to, well, one thing I'd like to ask you about that I don't know that I've ever really pressed you about is the structure, you having these 18 chapters, and your decision to do that. It's, you know, it's an hour long, so it's a lot of chapters, and you title all of them, and they're different, but they stay kind of organized around the idea, around the title. Can you talk a little bit about deciding to do that? And to me, and maybe this is wrong, it relates back to the fact that you made zines before, and even those shorter videos that you had shown me, that somehow this seems related. But anyway, can you talk a little bit about the chapter structure?
So when I started working on Mommy, Beta was working with 2B, this new startup program, and it was just like a basic template, kind of like kid pics, and they kind of like sponsored some of the film for me to like work on while I was testing out that new program. So I would use it like just kind of as a sketchbook or like a mood board or something like that, and use it. But in the end, the simplest way and the way that made the most sense was just to use it as the chapter titles.
Mm-hmm. You know, as Chrissie mentioned, the film's a lot of things, right? It's a portrait of your mother, the story of her death, of your childhood, but also of your becoming an artist in a lot of ways, and kind of grappling with that, and her anxiety about that. I mean, Chrissie, maybe you want to talk a little bit about this. And the MoMA portrait seemed really to get to that, this idea, and this is something that Chrissie said to me yesterday, that it's about, the film's about you, it's about your family, but then it's also about your kind of being an artist and being in this community of artists.
Yes, I mean, I think what's interesting also is the way you go back and forth. This is not something, it starts off as something linear, and then it goes back and forth. So it pulls you into childhood, teenagehood, and then back to childhood again, and then forward, and then back, which is again, the structure is emotional rather than linear time, in terms of a time frame. I mean, it's broadly linear because there's your parents, there's your father, and then your father leaves, and so of course it's broadly linear within the chapters. But then on top of that, there's layered this other kind of sort of structure, which is an emotional one. So I think it's interesting the way we experience your life as you're moving forward and then becoming an artist. And there is something about this moment of kind of maturity, or being grown up and taking your mom to the Museum of Modern Art, which is something we in a way all want to do. And so there's something very grown up about doing that. There's a kind of like, I'm showing you something, and I'm showing you something that relates to who I want to be and what I want to do. And that moment is very interesting in relation to the previous moment where your mum is calling you, and she's going, I really care about you, and this is not okay. And if you come back home, you could save $400 a month, and all that. And this is the struggle of artists from, always. And so that process of maturity in general, and towards an artist who has some kind of independent voice and is taken seriously as a creative person in particular, is something that lies really at the heart of this, because you go from your mum guiding you and teaching you and showing you and being your supporter and friend to you having a certain kind of maturity then as a creative person who is trying to find their voice. And so in a way, going to the museum is a way of sort of doing that.
It feels really emotional, but you kind of put yourself out there in a really brave and kind of raw way that it makes the whole thing feel very searing. When you talk about that, did you always know? I mean, there's this image, there's the image of you in the bathroom, I think, at the house that I always think about. Was that a tough decision to put that in there? Was that something you always knew would be part of it? Can you say a little bit about that?
I feel like I don't like looking at myself like that, and it's like embarrassing, but I think it's important for it to be in there. But I don't like it, but it just it's just how it was and how I felt and what was happening, and it had to be in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you say in the film, like, you don't know what death feels like until someone close to you dies, and I have always thought this is sort of the closest I've ever kind of gotten to appreciating that, something visual. So that's an amazing thing about the film. Can we talk a little bit about, one thing that's really nice about the show upstairs is that you can see excerpts of Mommy. There are 4 installations upstairs, one based on Mommy, one based on Maggie, one based on Maggie's father and on Maggie's sister, and pieces of the film were excerpted and installed. You see an installation on the right of the Mommy work, are installed upstairs and are part of the show. Can you, and we had actually, Chris and I had before we'd seen Mommy finish, we saw this work at Green Neftali, which had parts of Mommy on it. Can you talk a little bit about taking pieces of an hour-long film and kind of putting it in an installation like this, and what you did differently in these instances, how you kind of personalize them?
So for the Green Neftali show, that was first. The film wasn't even complete at the time, but I was asked to be in the show, so I worked on these sculptures, and that show also kind of pushed me to make sculptures. That was kind of my introduction. I've never really made TV art before, but the Green Neftali show was playing the film up to the point where I finished it. I mean, up to the point at that edit. And then this show at the Mirror Cell show, it's just basically every character and every my family, every person in my family has a TV, and basically my mom and my dad, my sister and I are TVs and installations, and each installation is playing one chapter, the introduction chapter, in the show.
It seems like Chrissy and I talked about this a little bit. There's a unique relationship here between this feature-length film and these sculptural objects. I mean, I can't think of a lot of other examples where we've had that play out quite like this in the museum, and what it means to see bits of the film kind of intensified with these objects versus seeing the film, the full film. So we were, and we worked with you to kind of think about how are we going to do something different, right, than what we did at Green Neftali here. and pretty quickly. And I even think this relates to the fact that the film was chapters already. It kind of lent itself to this, but that pretty quickly you said I would want kind of each character in the film, the four of us, to be one of those installations. Maybe we can just go back for 1 second. One thing that really struck me about it is these kind of very surreal moments, that it's not at all marching along in some kind of linear narrative, and there are moments where it becomes very visual and you're kind of overlaying images one on top of the other. This kind of sequence in the beginning I've really always loved. Can you talk a little bit about that, about kind of combining images and overlaying images or graphics on top of kind of a background image and changing the type of imagery throughout the film?
So every chapter is different, and this chapter, the Maggie chapter specifically, I just wrote down, like, collected all these ideas of, like, what reminded me or what I wanted to be in this chapter. Like Momotaro-san, it opens with that, like, the peach image, and it's this Japanese folktale that my grandmother used to sing to me. So I felt like that was kind of the first thing that it should open up with. And then at the time I was listening to like a lot of white noise on my phone, and there was like a baby in a womb sound. So that was like the heartbeat in the background. And then I just collected all these ideas and thoughts and collaged them in the chapter.
Another thing that strikes me as you're describing that is two things. One is the way in which you use different size screens. So sometimes it's a single image like this with the screen defined by these four edges and then objects or images within that. And then other times you divide the screen, sometimes like on a computer screen or when editing, in something like 20 parts or 3 parts, or at the beginning there's a series of slides and you hear the slide carousel as, you know, the slides of your mum when she was young proceed one after the other as though someone's there just showing them to us like this. And then it goes from super analog to very digital and back again, which is, you know, so there's this, again, another collage also technologically of the way the screens shift in size and number, and then the way the technology shifts from analog to digital, and then at some point there's an audio cassette. And then also the way in which all the sounds, all the soundtracks, songs are from a particular moment, and they're all songs that are particularly important to you. And you know, I was looking through the list, and I was looking through, it's like everything from Brendan Fowler's Bar to, you know, I Want to See, Leonia, Where Were You? I mean, Say It Ain't So, and it's very much, there's no nostalgia in that because the soundtrack is, again, it's like the soundtrack to your life right then, which is interesting. So it doesn't draw on anything else but that, and then you talking. And where you go back into the past, it's through, you know, voicemails and telephone conversations with your mom and things like that. So I think the contrast between the music, which is all in the present, and then the spoken word, which is in the past, and then the subtitles, which are also about translation, I think that's another very interesting way in which the soundtrack and the narrative are moved forward.
What Chrissie said kind of reminds me of like a story. Like when I was really little, like I had these glow stars, and I didn't have silly tack to put them on the walls, so my mom was just saying, just use rice. So I would just like mold rice, be really annoyed, and like glue the stars on the ceiling. But that was part of like learning how to be resourceful with what was like around me, and all these different forms of media. Like I would just use and like just try to use everything and like in different formats, like, and record with whatever I was able to, and use whatever kind of like editing software, like everything that I had access to. I would just push it and use it to like its maximum ability, I guess.
It also just quickly reminds me of when you know, in the film you talk about how your mom kept everything. And there's also a way in which maybe your mom's presence is in the film through the things that she kept, the photographs and the objects and various things you see in the house, you know.
And things you kept of hers, Maggie, right? Like
Yeah.
there are some notes you have from that she must have left you a long time ago when she was at work, and seeing those was kind of amazing and makes me think about, like it's interesting to have a found object like that be so present in a film. And then to see the sculptures here, you kind of play that out yet again with things that, you know, are from your childhood or things she particularly liked that are in that cabinet. Can we talk a little bit about, you know, this idea that this is a lot of things, but one thing this is about you coming to New York and going to Pratt and being part of a bigger community of artists here in New York. And, you know, one kind of amazing thing about the film is the thank yous at the end, that it's a lot of artists working in New York and that you're friends with. And can you talk a little bit about how important that was to you?
So I just like took my phone and like added everyone that was in there. Just kidding.
That was very nice of you. More people should do that.
I just felt like kind of while working on this project, I kind of felt like infinite love from everyone in a way, and I felt like through friends I was able to do this too. It's like when your friends become your family, and I just had to put everyone in there, like anyone that I spoke to Mommy about, or anyone that like helped me with anything, or like anything, like I wanted to put everything in the movie, like everything I knew up to this point.
All right, so maybe we will turn this over to some questions.
Hello. Thank you so much, Maggie. This was just really wonderful. My name is Ravi Chandra. I'm actually visiting from San Francisco, so I'm just so happy to have been here at a time when this screened. And a couple questions. I think your film especially speaks to a lot of issues that are particularly resonant for Asian Americans. You know, the immigrant identity, the sacrifices of the parents, and the journey of the parents, and how important they are to us, and the kind of how deep and complex our relationships are, and also how we struggle with them as well. And I think that's just also wonderful. And I actually do a lot of writing for the Asian American Film Festival in San Francisco. So I'm wondering if you have a plan, and I hope you do, to bring this to an Asian American audience, and through film festivals or anything else, because I think it really does speak powerfully to them, to us.
I would like to do that. Thank you.
You know, this is a work that does an incredible number of things and is about and engaged with an incredible number of things. But I think, Chrissie, to you, it was, you know, significant that a piece of this, Maggie, is the story of your mother kind of coming here from Taiwan and like working really hard and opening pings, and that kind of classic American immigrant story, I think, really resonated for us and is kind of a really important thing in our collection, you know, dating back to 120 years ago.
Absolutely, and you know, we're bringing in films, documentary films, narrative films, by the Asian American community, also African American, also Middle Eastern American, and that's very, very important. Also, that kind of experimental narrative strand of the collection is something that you were adding to and making more complex. And it's very important to us.
I think your film was very poignant, and it also speaks to every parent's nightmare of dying and leaving a mess for their children. I'm sure your mother just wanted you to be happy, do your art, and have a good life, and not put you through all this. and I'm sure she would be very proud.
Thank you. I feel like the mom TV installation upstairs in the Mirror Cells show kind of is my mom's altar, and it is kind of her, like, I feel like her spirit is there sometimes, like, because I can feel her spirit around me. But that TV installation is a way of, like, letting her know that I'm okay, and for everyone else to, like, come and visit her altar and say hi.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. And again, the film is screening tomorrow at 4 p.m. and then again on June 4th with the conversation with Leslie Jameson. So please come back. Thank you. And Maggie, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your honesties.